Watching some of the media coverage yesterday, I think this is one of my favourites from CNN and their journalists just in shock over how badly the Democrats were performing.
You asked, are there any places that the vice president is overperforming Joe Biden in 2020? So we could show you that as well. We just bring that out here. Harris overperforming in 2020.
Holy smokes.
There you go. So let this go away and see if there's anything on the east side there.
Literally nothing?
Literally nothing.
Literally not.
Emily, why were they so shocked?
Yeah, because there was this narrative, and I heard Democratic consultants say this, that they were seeing women in focus groups show up who were going to vote against their husbands. And they ran an ad. They put about $30,000, a ton of money, but one group put $30,000 behind this ad, now infamous, voiced by Julia Roberts, telling women the last place they have the right to choose is in the ballot box, and implying, they don't have to vote for Trump if their husbands are voting for Trump. They can vote for Kamala Harris. That is what Democrats expected to see in suburban Atlanta and suburban Milwaukee, places like that, suburban Philadelphia. And we did see in suburban Milwaukee and suburban Atlanta, there were some counties that went a little bit more Dem than they had before, but only like +1 or +2 points, not +5, not +7 in ways that Democrats were counting on to give Kamala a victory. That's the only way they could have done it.
We have heard from Vice President Kamala Harris. Here's the very start of her concession speech.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Look, to give her credit, that would be such an incredibly hard thing to do, but watching it, it just feels like she didn't quite want to say the words out loud, and it comes after refusing to speak last night.
Yeah, she did. And she initially had that set of remarks scheduled for 2 hours later, all the way at 6 p.m., which here in the States is after you'd be able to get on the 6 o'clock news, the 5 o'clock news. And people were very confused. And actually, some people were pretty upset because even when Hillary Clinton spoke at, I think it was noon in 2016, people were upset about that. It's sort of seen as a Democratic norm that you speak as early as you possibly can in order to go about the peaceful transition of power, which was probably her biggest applause line of that entire speech. She said, when we lose, we do it peacefully. And that was obviously a dig at Donald Trump in 2020. So it was interesting, as Kamala Harris wanted to sort of claim the high ground, she waited pretty late into the day to go ahead and make her remarks. And a lot of people on her side, including pundits on places like CNN and MSNBC, are now pointing fingers at their fellow countrymen and really sort of smearing people as bigots, sexists, racists for choosing Donald Trump instead of Kamala Harris. So there's a lot of cope going on.
Yeah, it's wild to watch some of the left-wing media just try and figure it out, just having some meltdowns on air. Let's look at the market reaction. Wall Street and Bitcoin rallied to record highs, and the dollar absolutely soared after Donald Trump's victory in the US presidential election. So what does that say? I look at that and I suppose it shows that Donald Trump is seen as quite a strong president.
I mean, I think it says a lot, yeah, because so Donald Trump had consolidated support of the crypto community. People like the Winklevoss twins had given, I think they each gave $1 million to the Trump campaign. People who are very favorable towards crypto. So, of course, I mean, it makes sense now that crypto would soar. And when it comes to the market, Donald Trump is promising to make his tax cuts permanent as soon as he gets into office. He's promising to slash regulatory red tape. That's what Wall Street really likes to hear. So that's a pretty good. He has some obviously populist economic theories. He's talked about tariffs that make a lot of economists and a lot of business people uncomfortable. But the market's still going up. I mean, I think that says a lot.
Absolutely. Look, what's going to happen next? It's obviously not official until January 20, but Donald Trump has made a lot of promises. You mentioned just a few of them, but what does it really mean for the southern border and the migrant crisis? What is this mass deportation going to look like in America?
That's a huge question, and certainly on a lot of people's minds here in the US right now, because there are a lot of people who would be likely eligible for that mass deportation, because just over the course of the Biden administration, so many people are here illegally. Now, one of the interesting things during the Biden administration is a lot of people came in through legal channels and claimed asylum at the border, which would mean deporting people who claimed asylum because of the way the Biden administration funneled them through this legal channel would get a little tricky. So I don't know the contours. I don't think they know what they're expecting to do with that. But they are very, very serious, very, very serious about the prospect of mass deportations. And it polls really well in the United States. Most voters are supportive of it, which I think speaks to just how dramatic the influx of migrants was over the last several years. So I expect them to take that. I mean, there's a ton of demand for them to take that very seriously. It's not a fringe far right issue. It's something that they're absolutely planning to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Donald Trump often gets a bad rap when it comes to women's issues, but he's also promised free IVF for those who need it. I think that's quite a great policy.
He calls himself the father of IVF, which is a very Trumpian turn of phrase. So that is one of the ways that they neutralized. A lot of Democrats were expecting this wave of suburban voters would be motivated by the overturning of Roe v. Wade, because they saw that happen in the midterms in 2022. So that didn't materialize, I think, in part because Donald Trump himself said that he disagreed with hardline Republicans on the issue of abortion, and he came out and said, I'm in favor of free IVF. He said that it should be covered by the government. He wants a plan where it's actually covered. The government finds a way to make it covered for every woman, every family that wants to use IVF. And so that neutralizes all of these attacks that Democrats were running around the country, saying that Republicans were the extremists on abortion and IVF, and that Donald Trump would be a threat on abortion and IVF. So I think that was actually a pretty significant contribution to his victory, because it's harder to scare women when Trump is talking about the issue himself that way.
Absolutely, even though I noticed that issue or that policy didn't get as much coverage as I suppose some of the attacks that came from the left. And I think that's kind of one of the areas where Kamala Harris failed. There was just so much focus on Donald Trump being compared to Hitler, and for women's issue only really focusing on abortion. I just don't think that was enough.
No, and this is actually very interesting. If you go to Real Clear Politics, favorability, or actually if you look at their polling averages for Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's numbers started to dip on October 23rd. So the dip that she experienced before the election really starts on October 23rd. On October 22nd, The Atlantic magazine dropped this, what they thought was a bombshell report about how Donald Trump was looking for generals that were like Hitler's generals. Not only did that dominate the media narrative for the next couple of days, but Democrats running the Harris campaign latched onto it. They even projected it onto Madison Square Garden ahead of Donald Trump's rally there. It became a talking point, and Kamala Harris's her polling average never recovered actually from that. And nobody's really made that connection. I'm not saying it's exactly the same correlation, but I do think it's an indication that Democrats, after they got that story and started sending Liz Cheney around to swing states and calling Donald Trump a fascist and comparing him to Hitler, that really distracted them from their economic message. And their economic message is honestly not great if you're someone in the state and you're still not feeling good about the economy. But they should have at least been trying to have that conversation instead of resorting to the fascism and the Hitler attacks.
Absolutely. I think it did them no favors, and people can really see through those attacks. So what does the future hold for the Democrats? What's next?
I'm so curious about this, because they can either do what they did in 2016, which is double down on the cope. So they could double down on blaming Russia and blaming sexism. And we are already seeing that from some corners of the party and of the media. On the other hand, this has now happened twice. Media favorability or media trust is tied for the all-time low that it hit in 2017 after the 2016 election. The business is a real problem for places obviously like the Washington Post, where we've seen Jeff Bezos all but beg his employees to let him run a business and to let him go back to journalistic practices before the modern era. So they can do one of two things. They can totally double down, or they can learn lessons. And right now I'm not seeing a lot of signs that they're actually willing to say, we need to pursue persuade people and regain their trust, they're pointing fingers. And again, it's early, but the indications are not good.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Look, we're also going to see RFK Jr. have a role in Trump's team, particularly to do with health. How significant is this?
This is huge. Now, what he wants to do is going to take an enormous amount of just manpower, political will to accomplish. So even with 4 years, what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wants to accomplish at, for example, the FDA, it's going to take a lot. I just don't think there's too much you can do. It's sort of like trying to turn the Titanic around in terms of what his goals are. That said, there are executive actions, there are regulations that can be rolled back, there are regulations that can be enacted. He'll be really hard for Trump to confirm to a Senate confirmed position, so like a cabinet secretary or something like that. But it's possible that he can serve as sort of a czar, a shadow advisor who's heavily influencing whoever is in charge of the FDA or the Department of like DHS, these health organizations, or HHS, I should say, Health and Human Services. So he can play a really significant role. Will it be as dramatic as people on the left are claiming? I don't think so. It's just, I mean, you just don't even have enough time when you have a 4-year term.
What about the MAGA movement? You mentioned time. Obviously, Trump's only got 4 more years, but he really has created this MAGA movement that I think will carry through.
You know, this is the thing that Republicans have to figure out right now is Donald Trump is making these gains in states like Maryland and New Jersey that contributed to his ability to win the popular vote. Similarly, he got people who didn't turn out in the midterm elections, low propensity voters, people who are not reliable in terms of their turnout, to actually come and vote on election day. Can other Republicans do that? Can they do that with Hispanic men? Can they do that with young men? I don't know. I mean, I think it's a huge question because Trump is so singular. He's the guy who has Dana White and Joe Rogan and Elon Musk. And, you know, while on paper, Elon Musk might want to support J.D. Vance or Tom Cotton or some other senator, having him actually go out and do as much as he did for Donald Trump and to rally the momentum in the public and in popular culture, I feel like that's really what ultimately swept all of these low propensity voters to the polls. So whether that can be repeated without Trump on the ballot, Republicans now need to figure out how they can do that, if they can do that.
Absolutely. Emily Jashinsky, so great to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Thank you. Appreciate it.